Hey vinyl friends and vinyl community, it's Brian from Brian's Vinyl Records. It's Monday, which usually means it's time for another installment of Vinyl Editions. But this week we're doing something a little different. I will be filming another episode of Vinyl Editions and I'll probably be releasing that later this week. But as everyone knows who's followed the channel, my dad passed away a week ago and his funeral is tomorrow. So I wanted to do a video as a tribute to him and show you albums that remind me of my dad as kind of like a little, one-off thing here to kind of celebrate my dad and his influence on me and my musical styles. So I've got several albums here that I want to share with you that start with the obvious ones, and everybody who's watched my videos in the past knows these stories, but this is the first one. This is Ram by Paul McCartney. This is my dad's copy that he gave to me a couple years ago. I cleaned it up really nice. It had been sitting in storage for quite some time, so it was really dirty, but I cleaned it up and it sounds fantastic now. This is his favorite Paul McCartney album. I remember as a kid flipping through his albums. He only had a small stack of them, but this one I always wondered what this was. I never really listened to it as a kid. I mean, we did a couple times, but not as much as some of the other stuff that we had. But this one, the cover always intrigued me. So this actually is a great album, and it has become my favorite Paul McCartney album as well. I love this. I have the mono reissue that was done in 2012 in Europe. I picked up a copy of that. It's awesome. So yeah, this is Paul McCartney's Ram. Every time I look at this or listen to this, it reminds me of my dad. This one is also one that reminds me a lot of my dad. This is the one we listened to a lot on vinyl growing up. He had a lot. We obviously converted to CDs in the late 80s, but he had this on vinyl, and it is probably my favorite Beatles album, which a lot of people think that's weird, but I love this album. We listened to this all the time as kids, so I've got some great memories listening to this album growing up. So Beatles, Let It Be. My sister has his copy, so I had to go out and get a copy of it myself, but great album. And this one is the Beatles' Rubber Soul. This is the Capitol issued copy from the 60s, and the reason I picked this one, we listened to this a lot as kids. Dad had the CD growing up, but what really reminds me, and what's really sad, is the reissues that come out now don't have this song on there, but the song I Just Seen a Face. This song is special because my dad plays guitar, and every time he had his friends over or anything like that, we'd sit around the fireplace and they would strum on guitars. And the song that my dad always went to, there were two songs, and I'll get to the second in a minute, but the first one was I Just Seen a Face. It's one of my dad's favorite Beatles songs, and he would sing it all the time. So I have fond memories of my dad singing I Just Seen a Face by the Beatles. And like I said, this is the Capitol issue from the 60s, where it's the first song on there. Later pressings were replaced with Drive My Car. The track listing on this album compared to my 2009 reissue are completely different. So there's, I think, 3 or 4 songs on here that aren't on the other one, and vice versa. But if you get the old Capitol, you'll have I Just Seen a Face by the Beatles on there. A great tune, great memories. All right, the next one is the other song. So the Byrds' Greatest Hits. My dad loves the Byrds, absolutely love the Byrds. But the song that he really loves the most is this one right here, I'll Feel a Whole Lot Better. This is the other song that whenever he had people over to sing and play guitars, that's one of the songs he'd always go to, is that Byrd song. Loved playing that Byrd song. And he especially really loved it when later Tom Petty issued this album, Full Moon Fever, which had a cover of Feel a Whole Lot Better on there. So this one we listened to all the time as kids. He got the CD when this first came out, and it was constantly spinning in our house. Just a great album by Tom Petty. It was my introduction to Tom Petty, and as I said, if you look at side 2, track 1, there it is, Feel a Whole Lot Better by the Byrds. So this was the version I knew of the song, other than my dad playing it, but this is the original here on this compilation of the Byrds' Greatest Hits. Just my dad loves the Byrds, loves Tom Petty, so these two, very fond memories of that. This is the first Eric Clapton album I ever knew. My dad bought the CD of this when it came out, and we listened to this album all the time. I shouldn't say probably when it came out, but he had the CD of this, and we listened to this all the time. This was constantly played until Eric Clapton's Unplugged album came out, and then that one got a lot of play at the house. But this has always been my favorite Clapton album, just because as kids growing up, we heard it all the time. And the song She's Waiting, Knock on Wood, I mean, those are songs that resonate with me to this day. So I love Eric Clapton's Behind the Sun album. This one here is my dad's copy of Elvis. This is, I believe this is a compilation album of some early songs from him. I can't recall exactly for sure, but this is his album. He had an original of this album, and he always likes to tell the story of how he got into an argument with one of his roommates, and his roommate took the album off the turntable, tossed it across the room, and broke it in half. And he was so pissed off about it. And the friend eventually went out and got him this copy, which is I believe this is a 1970s reissue of the album. So he had an original pressing of this, and unfortunately, a little bit of anger with the roommate, and it got broken. And so he has this version. This one I got from him as well, from his collection when he was getting rid of stuff. Not in the best shape in the world, but the album sounds pretty good. It's definitely got some wear on it, but cleaned up okay. And so I keep this in my collection because it was my dad's. So, all right, this next one, I remember. I don't know if I've talked a lot about it, but we used to go to a store called Great American Music in Minnetonka, Minnesota growing up. It's now, I think, a Fireplace store or something like that. But that's where I bought my first albums, my first cassettes and CDs and all that stuff. And we'd go there probably once a month or so, and Dad would buy some new CDs. When this one came out, I believe it was 1987, I remember going to the Great American Music and him buying this album. And so the song Set On You is always engraved in my memory because he liked that song a lot, and we listened to it quite a bit. So when I found this on vinyl, I had to pick it up, and it's a great album. George Harrison. This next one here, Winona Judd. I believe we got this for my dad for Christmas one year. He really loved Winona Judd. And we bought this for Christmas one year. And then a couple years later, when she released her second album, my mom, my dad, and I went and saw her in concert. And just one of the great memories I have. Probably the only concert I think I went to with my folks was this concert. And it was Black Hawk and Winona Judd together. Great concert. I was there for Black Hawk, they were there for Winona Judd, and all in all, it was just a fun time. So I always think of my dad when I pull out this album. So I was super excited when I found this on Discogs, and I didn't pay a whole lot, and was really happy to have that to my collection. Later, in later years, my dad became a big fan of Stevie Ray Vaughan. So he wasn't really listening to him a whole lot when Stevie was alive. It was later that he kind of discovered Stevie's music, got real into Stevie Ray Vaughan, and went out and bought this guy here. This is a 3-disc set of kind of like live stuff and rarities from Stevie Ray Vaughan. It's got a DVD on there of a show. It's really good. So Stevie Ray Vaughan always reminds me of my dad. My dad liked him so much he bought a artist's drawing of Stevie Ray Vaughan and hung it in his house for a long time. I'm not sure exactly where that drawing is anymore. Next up, we got the Dixie Chicks. My dad loves the Dixie Chicks, and we all like them too. My wife loves the Dixie Chicks, but what I love about it is he always called them the Chixie Dicks, and but really loved listening to them. And they played in our house a lot. My parents played them all the time in their house when we were visiting. So Dixie Chicks always, reminds me of my dad. All right, and the last two I want to show. This first one, I've told the story before, but this is Warrant's Cherry Pie. Why would this remind me of my dad? Well, I got this as a Christmas gift when it came out. I believe it was 1990. Yep, 1990. When this came out, I got this as a Christmas gift. And I remember it was a cassette tape. My dad saw the cover and said, "You can't listen to that until I've listened to it first." And so he took it from me and he put it in his car. And I think 2 or 3 weeks went by and I hadn't heard anything. So I went and asked him. I said, "Dad, have you had a chance to listen to that cassette tape yet? I would like to listen to it." And he goes and gets it and just gives it to me. The instant I heard the first song, Cherry Pie, off this. I knew for a fact that he had not listened to it at all, because had he listened to it, there's no way he would have given it to me. At the time, I was only 12 years old, and I just know he would not have given that to me to listen to. So I know for a fact he didn't listen to it, but it always reminds me of that story when I pull out Lawrence Cherry Pie. Last but certainly not least, an unexpected one here. This is Michael Jackson's Bad album. My dad is not a Michael Jackson fan, not a big fan at all. Didn't care for his music, didn't really like it. But why this reminds me of my dad is that I was 10 years old, and he had surprised me with tickets to see Michael Jackson on this tour. My dad, like I said, didn't like Michael Jackson, but he knew how much I really liked Michael Jackson, and he somehow was able to get tickets to the concert, and he took me to see Michael Jackson as my first ever concert. And so that was, I mean, pretty awesome for your first concert experience. It was hard to live up to that experience when I started going to concerts later in life, but I want to just say thank you to my dad for gutting it out and listening to Michael Jackson all night. But this always reminds me of Dad because of what he did for me as a kid, bringing me to see this concert. So there you go. That is everything I wanted to share with you today. There's a lot more stuff that I could have pulled out, but I just didn't have the time, really. I mean, if you've lost a loved one or a family member, a close one, you know that your time is limited as you run up to these events and stuff. So I wanted to get this out there as a tribute to my dad. I think I did pretty good with the albums I selected here. Those are the ones that mean the most to me when thinking about him. So thank you all for everyone's support. I really, really appreciate it as we go into tomorrow with the funeral and say goodbye for one last time. It's going to be tough, but it's going to be a good send-off. We've taken a lot of time to plan a good send-off for him, and hopefully it shows. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate, like I said, all the support. If you're new, please give it a thumbs up if you like this video, and also hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment below. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, keep spinning, vinyl friends.